Good evening and welcome to the overnight session of From Day One. As you can hear by the music in the background, Art Bell is warming up to take it with his guest for part 2 tonight. And we will have Neil Sanders and Art Bell from December 7th, 2015. This was on Modern Mind Control. So without further ado, let's get to Art Bell and Neil Sanders.
World events to cover up what is essentially going to be of economic benefit to the invading country.
Yeah, I'm sure that's true. And we can look back to what we did in Iraq as the reason for ISIS being where it is right now. And I do look at it that way. And boy, what a mess that was. However, no, there's no saying he was a good guy. I mean, and there's really no saying Assad's a good guy either. Now, they're very, very strong hands in their country when they have control.
But this is the point, Art. It's not as simple as good guys and bad guys, is it?
No, it isn't. And I'm willing to say this much. I'm not willing to, I think, go as far as you go, but sometimes it seems like these bad guys, these iron hands, are what a country needs. It may well be that not every country is meant for the kind of freedom that we have here in America. They're just simply not ready for it. And when you eliminate that iron hand, you get something worse.
Well, I mean, you're always going to get a period of, like, after any emancipatory act where people go crazy. I mean, you could compare that to, I imagine the first week that weed was legal in Colorado, there was a lot of people that were throwing up.
Actually, I just did a show on that, Neil, and nothing at all bad happened in Colorado. In fact, the crime rate actually has gone down.
No. What I mean is you'll have a bit of a blowout. Like when something suddenly becomes available, like when you go on a diet or something like that.
I'm sure there were long lines, if that's what you're asking. Long lines.
I beg your pardon?
Long lines.
You know, how do you mean long lines?
Well, it's in front of the pot shops in Colorado.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah. That's what I mean. So yes, of course you're going to see some sort of chaotic scenario, but I don't know if that justifies despotism.
Right. So again, how is ISIS, with these horrible videos, able to convince young people in this country, young Muslims, to turn from the center of what is their ideology to a new one and then randomly kill? That is as much of a mind control at a distance as I could imagine, no matter what we talk about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's very effective, and it uses the same techniques as I say, as joining the army, as selling Nike trainers. It's that inclusory thing. It's like, I want to be part of something, and the whole point is it's positioned in such a way. I would imagine that there's not that you've got to be pretty damn desperate to want to get into that sort of thing. So, you know, like a lot of cult mentalities, I imagine that they're picking on a lot of weaknesses in human psyches and stuff like that. Getting people to blame existential problems like on one thing. You know, my life's not going particularly well, etc., 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 and this bloody American imperialism. You know what? It's all down to American imperialism. And then you'll channel it in that way. I would assume. You know, that's the thing. You've also got to appreciate that a lot of these people are coming from sort of war-torn areas where they've got a very limited view of the world. And so their position they would position themselves as freedom fighters incorrectly. I would hasten to add, but that's how it can be done. This is how you convince people of things, right? Walter Lippmann said, how do you control people? Well, you paint the pictures in people's heads because people work. I'll put it this way: you find a lump of yellow metal, you assume it's gold, you would react as if you found gold. If you've never seen a map or a television and somebody tells you don't go that way, you'll fall off the edge of the earth, you're not going to go that way because you work on the received wisdom of the pictures that are painted in your head. So
I do interview people about the edge of the earth where you fall off too, Neil. That's a whole other story. Hold on, please, Neil. We're at a short break. It's 2 minutes. We'll be right back. This is Midnight in the Desert. I'm Art Bell.
Coming to you at the speed of light in the darkness, this is Midnight in the Desert with Art Bell. Now, here's Art.
Somebody writes in the wormhole, but this is going to be about mind control tonight. Really? You mean you don't consider what ISIS is doing to the people that it somehow controls from the other side of the earth? Well, not quite, but pretty nearly the other side of the earth, right? With messages on the internet that take them from being a moderate Muslim to being an extremist Muslim who will go out and kill randomly because they believe that's what's wanted. And that's what God wants. That's what they're doing. And if that's not mind control, then I would hate to see real mind control. I mean, that's serious stuff. I have no idea how you convert somebody like that. But apparently, if you've got enough millions of people, some of them on edge, some of them ready to grasp the kind of stuff that ISIS sends, I don't know. Earlier on CNN, see, I do watch CNN, they were saying, well, look, the media, refers to these, in quotes here, young masterminds. Young masterminds. You know, like the knife attack there in London, they call him a young mastermind. Well, that phrase has an effect on young men who might not feel they're the masterminds of the world, with the highest IQs. They might decide, well, to be a mastermind, all I need to do is just stab somebody with a knife. What about that, Neil?
I think you've nailed it there. I think because that's obviously a very grievous mischaracterization. Also, the gentleman, it was just a nutter. It wasn't in any way connected by for the looks of it to any cell or anything. He might have took up the ideology. But again, that just to sort of appease that gentleman as well, and to sort of tie back to my previous point, what I was saying about pictures, if you can paint the pictures, you can control perceptions. So, for example, in an area like the Middle East, you can explain certainly to somebody whose only knowledge of America is what's coming to him from his peers. Yes. And from what he might have viewed, you can paint them as evil. You can paint the world in the way that you want, and then people will react in the way.
It's true.
So the other thing is just that basically the most effective propaganda is, how do you get people to kill for you? You say that other person is going to kill you, right? And so, and to be quite honest, in certain areas of the Middle East, that would not be a particularly difficult argument thing to sell to a young gentleman.
Yeah, but how do you sell it to some guy and some girl in San Bernardino or Redlands or wherever it was?
It comes to the next point. There's a certain thing whereby you get a certain psychological comfort, and as you said before, a certain amount of self-credit. You get a certain amount of power by associating yourself with this broader group, this huge group. What happens then is a process called de-individuation, whereby basically you sort of hypnotically almost take on the attributes of the group. It's like it take it to a sort of micro level. That's why perfectly sensible people get caught up in like hockey riots or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Because you go along with the masses and you get swept up with it. The problem is when you get into a group like that, you take on responsibility. So you would feel guilty, or you would feel if you did not act then you are not helping in the situation, basically. You're proliferating the situation. I'm not saying, again, that is correct. Mm-hmm. But what I'm saying is that you put somebody in a position where they feel that this other ideological point wishes to kill them. And the only way that they can stop that is to get in first. As to draw back to my previous point, I don't think these people, they obviously were, but I don't think they think of themselves as bad. I think that they think of themselves as soldiers.
Oh, I agree.
And ultimately what they're doing is not as bad as the enemy. And I think that's how you convince people.
I agree. But it's a lot of this very, very violent ISIS propaganda that seems to turn people's minds. And that brings me back to the young masterminds comment. Or maybe just, I don't know, a sign of the times that they're able to do this. But in the past, horrible depictions of violence wouldn't exactly be something that would draw people to it, just quite the opposite, away from it. So
it's the internet age, though. People are desensitized by the internet. And also, when you're viewing something across the internet, it's not quite the same as in real life. You have a separation. There's a certain amount of bravado. I remember the internet first came out and like these gore sites were there. Like that's what lads used to go on, and the gorier the better, because it's like showing that you've got cojones. I can stand this and stuff like that. So there's a certain amount of machismo and proving oneself that goes into all these things. Again, it's tried and tested. Psychological methods of mind control and make you feel inferior and then bomb you with positive emotions to sort of bond you to a group. Once you're bonded to a group, you feel indebted to that group. So you'll do all sorts of things to prove your allegiance and so that you don't risk getting kicked out of that group, because you've put so much psychological investment. This is me. This is part of my psyche. This is what defines me as a person.
All right. Well, Neil, even though I don't fully understand how they can do what they can do with what they've got, I acknowledge it's working. So let me ask you this: how do you fight that?
How do you fight an ideology? You
Yes.
can't fight an ideology. This is the point. You can only fight through education, I suppose. But again, this is the problem. It's not as simple as that. It's not as straightforward as that. It is a multifaceted thing. You're going to get some people who are hardcore members of ISIS. You're going to get some people who are sort of wannabes that basically, again, take that on board as some sort of bolstering of their psyche. And then you're going to get all sorts of different disparate sort of groups. There's not just ISIS. There's al-Nusra. There's the Free Syrian Army that's there. There's Al-Qaeda still.
Sure.
There's a lot of groups. And the other thing is, Art, that you've got to appreciate, a lot of these are driven by mercenaries. Like, provably, there's a lot of mercenaries who just get paid to kill. And a lot of people are profiting from the continuation of a combat situation. Like, you've got to keep buying those bullets from somewhere.
Oh, yeah. I believe that Britain has been named as the next target of ISIS, right?
Well, according to our government, yes. And that may well happen. But again, you know, this begs into all sorts of questions about who it is that's actually, again, benefiting from these acts in the first place. You have to be suspicious when you sort of have knowledge of, like, the Gladio projects and stuff in Europe, where they were basically hiring fascist groups to kill civilians and blame it on the communists, and this was beneficial to NATO was doing this to you know, proliferate their own wants economically. America's done this, presided over genocide in South America numerous times, and often you use terror groups because essentially you want to. It's a proxy war. I think what is interesting about the whole point of terrorism is the fear that it creates. Now, if you're saying about what can we do about this, I know this is very strange, but you've not got to be afraid and knee-jerk. You've got to look at things rationally, and you've got to look at things from a step back, because when you're in a position of fear, you're going to fight or flight. You make black and white decisions. You don't have the time.
That's right.
To ruminate and to go, well, what's the most sensible option? More often than not, you go running to an authority figure. I mean, again, I'm not trying to be disrespectful by this, but you seem very impressed by the fact that the internet has managed to.
I am.
Well, absolutely. But I'll give you another example. Do you know Top Gun? the film Top Gun.
Yes.
One showing of that caused 1 million young men to go and join the Air Force. This is the point of perceptions, presentation of powerful entities that you can become a part of. You could join that. You could be Tom Cruise. You could be Val Kilmer. Imagine that. Okay, this is the same psychological thing that would be going on in the mind of somebody that's joining a terrorist organisation. And it's the same tried and tested tactics. Edward Bernays basically said as early as the proliferation of the television that this is the most effective way that we can spread propaganda. We can get messages instantaneously. That's the thing about the internet. Messages are instantaneous. And because of the culture of the internet, you often don't have time to check. You've got to pin your colours to a mast. You've got to stake your claim and say, yes, I'm with this. Yeah, no, I'm against that. Immediately. And before you know it, you're in an argument with 4 or 5 different people, and people are saying, which faction do you want to join? Well, an extension of that would be a political ideology.
Oh, absolutely. Look, these message boards, for example, Neil, if you study a message board, I think it's a study in itself. I mean, it will start out, and in the very beginning, everybody is, even though they're behind pseudonames, they're relatively polite to each other as the site builds, and acting in a civilized manner. However, given a few months and more members, there will develop, without a doubt, and there is no exception to this, a horrible fight in which one faction will be pitted against another.
Yep.
Now, that's just a microcosm, but it's like the rest of the world.
Absolutely. I mean, it's accentuated by the internet because of two things. Basically, one, you've got that separation of screens, so it's not like really being there. You can say something that you wouldn't say to somebody's face.
Right.
2, you've got an audience. Even though you're on your own, you've got an audience of peers that you don't want to come across as a punk, do you? Like, do you know what I mean? And you've got to impress these people, or psychologically. It's a very, very strange thing. Like trolling somebody or putting a negative comment on the internet. To do it, you just go, done. You never think about it again. But the person that's receiving that has to read that and take it in and stuff like that. And it's like a sort of missile that's been launched into their private world. It's like a drive-by heckling almost. And then you're sort of left with all that wave of indignation and nowhere to get it. The internet itself, when you come to things like that, is terrible because basically all it does is build narcissism, a sort of strange smiling depression where you've got these narcissists who are feeling inadequate because of the conversations that they're having, and everybody else basically hyping up their existence, using the best photographs and such like that. And this is the point. But again, it preys on people's insecurities.
Yeah, all this said, and what's going on the internet, again, from a mind control perspective, or a propaganda perspective, if you want to look at it that way, how do we combat what they're doing? There's got to be a mind control solution for what they're doing.
Well, I mean, there's lots. I mean, you could wipe their mind. I mean, how
wipe their mind?
Do you want to get? I mean, in what sense? Are you going to change these people's ideology?
In the same sense, Neil, that they're getting convinced to kill. There's got to be a way to convince them that killing is not a good solution, won't lead to anything productive.
Well, first you'd have to understand their ideology and what they want to achieve from it. Again, this is the thing. You can't just say, you couldn't go up to these people and say, what you're doing is wrong. Stop it. Because they don't think it's wrong.
You can't say that.
No.
But you perhaps could attempt to convince them that terrorism, which is designed to obtain political change, ain't going to work.
I'll flip it around on you, Art, because it's the same question. How could you convince a 5-star major general that bombing Syria would be of absolutely no use? You couldn't.
You couldn't. No. Not
well,
really.
There you go.
Not really.
This is the problem. Again, that's the point, because people have so very much invested into these ideas that basically it would be exactly the same thing. It's a very, very complicated situation, and I don't think it could be solved in a sentence. But it would be the same principle. Like somebody that's, their entire life in the U.S. military is convinced that what they're doing is the right thing. And that this action will ultimately be successful, and they're aware of the collateral damage and other clever use of language, which means dead civilians, which again came out of Tavistock, by the way. But ultimately, they feel what their actions will do will be beneficial, will be the right thing to do, and this is the problem that you face up against a terrorist organisation. So you've either got to show them that this is wrong, you've got to what you could do is you could reduce confidence in the leadership, or reduce confidence in the structure, to show that basically there's certain juxtapositions and falsities in their narrative. You could certainly do that. What you could explain is you could show the passages from the Quran that expressly forbid absolutely everything that they're doing. But again, you're getting into lots of different things, because again, it's not just a political manifestation.
Well, now you're working on it a little bit here.
Religion attached to it as well.
Right. Okay. So now you're working on it at least a little bit. That's what I wanted to hear. Where mind control can be used from that side to take an ideology that is quite calm and quite peaceful, and pick from it individuals and radicalize them.
Yeah.
And do all this over the internet. There's got to be a counter to that. In the world of mind control.
The counter would be basically, as I just said, education and stuff like that. The problem that you'd be rubbing up against is how open to that these people are. Because, it would be very much like when you go, again, trying to extricate somebody from a cult. You must have seen all these documentaries and stuff where they're trying to sort of get somebody out of, say, a Scientology, or the moon is, or something like that.
Yes.
The problem is that basically you're so embedded in something that any outside influence is seen with suspicion, is seen as an attack. Well, of course you'd say that. Of course you would say that. You're the enemy. I expect you to come at me with counter-propaganda, but I don't believe it.
Do you think this is out in left field, that there's any subliminal messages going on in the ISIS propaganda?
No, not really, because I don't think there's any need to do that, because again, it's based on more sort of tried and tested methods of disaffected people being sold an ideology, being sold a way out of their dismal lives, for want of a better expression. So I don't think there's any need for subliminals. Interestingly, Harvard has proved that subliminals do work, mostly if they're negative. There was an experiment where people were told to complete a computer program, and unbeknownst to them, subliminal words were flashed up. Some were positive, like joyous, happy, handsome. Some were negative, like decrepit, old, disease, that sort of thing. And it was discovered that if you flashed up the negative subliminals, the people found it incredibly difficult to actually get motivated and complete their task.
Huh. As I listen to you, I detect, I don't want to say a sympathy for ISIS. I think what I want to say is,
No.
I think that I detect an understanding on your part of why they do what they do.
No, not even that.
No?
I wouldn't say that. I don't justify it or anything. I understand why terrorists join terrorist organisations, and because of that, I understand that it's not as straightforward as saying, what is the answer? Because basically, it's very much driven by that organisation. I'll repeat that basically. I have absolutely no sympathies for ISIS, and I have absolutely no sympathies for their cause.
Well, I'm not asking about sympathies, though. I'm asking about understanding.
Well, again, in the same way that I understand why the IRA formed, and can understand their argument, which was vital. Again, we could take that out. That was vital to sort of the peace treaty that was eventually brokered by the IRA, with the IRA in England, was an understanding of their demands, and negotiation on all sides. I don't think that'll work in ISIS's sense, because I don't think they're interested. But again, if you want to move it further, you need to have an understanding of what their motivation is, and how you can respond to that. And so, I don't have any sympathies towards it at all. I understand how terrorist groups form, and I understand how cults draw people in, and so I can understand the psychological manifestations of why somebody might join something like that. But I'll just say it's stupid. It's absolutely stupid, but it's stupid joining a cult as well.
Okay, our president referred to ISIS as a death cult.
Yeah. I mean,
think that's
to
accurate?
an extent that's true, but also that's just very catchy copy, isn't it?
Well, it is, yeah. It is. Very catchy, death cult. However, you are likening ISIS to a cult, though, right?
Absolutely. Well, again, the psychological manifestations of why somebody would join it. But again, I would liken Air Jordans to a cult. Why do people wear Air Jordans? Because you know that you're better than the person that stood next to you. And that's not me. This is very, very. This is how advertising works. This is basically, if you want to be a great advertiser and understand the psychology of selling products, you need to understand why people join cults. Because that's the same thing with a product. No matter, there's a sliding scale of how seriously you would apply this to yourself, but any product is essentially a bit of a talisman. Why would you buy a Mercedes as opposed to what's a very poor car in America?
At the moment, Volkswagen.
Okay, fine. Well, this is the point. There are certain cultural things that are attached to there's a prestige in driving around in a Beamer or a Mercedes or whatever that is not necessarily aligned to, say, the particular quality or the customer service or anything like that, but there's an idea behind it. It's like those terrible, like, people are paying thousands of dollars for those Kanye West trainers. Why? Well, because they've got the endorsement, the celebrity endorsement, and also, again, basically, if you wear that, you're sending out a message to somebody else. Yeah, look at me. I've got this. I'm better than you in this sense.
I guess. I guess that's true. So, advertising. Tell me, just moving backward a little bit, what is your assessment of the Assad regime? I thought I heard something there.
Well, I don't really know. Again, I don't imagine it's nearly as bad as we're painting it, because we seem to be rather heavy-handedly propagandizing it. There are certain bloggers and activists and stuff that are sending like videos from inside Syria that paint a very different scenario to what's being painted of him. No doubt he's grimy. He's a dictator. What is curious about it, that I find curious, is that if there are all these definite reasons to depose him, why do we need to go around the bushes with it? Why do we need to hire proxy armies and create situations whereby you're trying to create uprisings and such like that?
All right. Well, I mean, you can kind of make the same case for Saddam Hussein, that he held that country together in a way that nobody else certainly has demonstrated they're capable of doing, including the full U.S.
Again, it's complicated because Saddam was a monster. There's no doubting that he was an absolute monster.
And Assad, on the monster scale, where's Assad?
I couldn't really tell you, because at the minute it's too mired in propaganda. I would imagine I would be incredibly surprised if he was in any way clean. Like, I'm sure that he's got a huge amount of skeletons in his closet. But then again,
actual skeletons.
Iran-Contra, El Salvador, places like that. You show me a leader of a country and I'll show you somebody that's got skeletons in their closet.
Usually,
even Obama's been killing people in Pakistan illegally with drone strikes, children and civilians. So, again, it's sliding scale. It's not as straightforward as, is this guy bad, let's get him.
Well, so he's not as bad as Saddam, in your mind?
I don't know. Like, I wouldn't imagine so.
Okay, I'm willing to accept, Neil, that we're propagandized, because I've lived out of the United States as many adult years as I have lived in it.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I watch the news in foreign countries, I fully understand that we are propagandized. I mean, there's simply no question about it. No question about it. I know we are. But some of it is true. We're not the best. We do evil, black things many times.
Yeah.
But we also have some things that we do that are sort of above average, freedoms that are above average when compared with freedoms around the world. And so we're not perfect, but we're better than a lot, and not as good as some of the other countries out there, I might add. There's more freedom in other countries than there is here.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because America's got more prisoners per capita than any country in the entire world.
We absolutely do.
So, which is interesting, because where are the drugs coming from? Well, at the minute, they're coming from Afghanistan.
What the?
Iraq, Chicago. You know El Chapo. You do know that the ATF basically gave El Chapo free rein to run as much drugs as he wanted into Chicago in exchange for certain information against other people. Now, you could say that they bargain with the devil. What you could say also is like in places like Compton, what you're doing is you're gentrifying the population and ensuring that you've got a huge slave labour market in the prison industrial complex. What do the people make in prisons now? Missiles. Circuit boards for missiles. It seems to be a self-feeding industry.
Well, it is.
Yeah.
It is. Yes, okay. So you have, I think the audience can tell from listening to you, you have a view of America that would probably not consistent with most Americans who have been propagandized by their own government for a long time. Fair to say?
No, not at all. I have a view of American and English foreign policy. I happen to think America is a fabulous place, and on a few times I've been lucky enough to be there, I've found it to be nothing but wonderfully courteous and fantastic, and it makes England look a bit poor, to be quite honest. So no, I really, really like America. I'm suspicious of its foreign policy, but I'm suspicious of Russians' foreign policy. I'm suspicious of France's foreign policy. I'm suspicious of Israel's foreign policy and the UK's foreign policy. What I would go back to when you're saying about Assad being bad and stuff like that, you're absolutely right. I'm sure you could make a case that painting him was terrible. You could make that same case in Bahrain. You could make that same case in Saudi Arabia.
Sure.
Why aren't we? And so that would be my point about propaganda, is that it's selective. It's selective, and that's again draws back to the concept of mind control and painting pictures in people's heads, and making connections, and forcing people to make choices based on limited information, and forcing that decision very, very quickly.
The British Empire, of course, has sort of been in decline for a long time.
Well, yeah.
Then came the American years, and even empire, if you want to call it that. And now it would appear that we are either leveling out or in decline. Would that be your view?
Very possibly, yeah. I mean, it certainly looks like that. Well, it certainly looks as if basically economically certain powers like China and Russia are creeping along, and America is perhaps not the single hyperpower anymore.
All right. I would love to discuss a little bit more about Syria with you, because I see the mix in Syria, Neil, as the devil's mix indeed, and no matter how you view it, with all these different countries flying jets and with anti-missile stuff all set up by the Russians and all the rest of that, I see almost an inevitable collision that could result in the next world war. I'm saying it's going to happen. I'm saying the ingredients are all there. It's like they're almost starting to come to a boil. Not quite, but you know, those little tiny bubbles you get before a full boil. Kind of like that. I'm Art Bell.
in the high desert. This is Midnight in the Desert with Art Bell. Please ring Art's bell at 1-952-225-5278. That's 1-952. Call Art.
It is. My guest all the way from Great Britain is Neil Sanders. And he's doing a great job. The subject for tonight was mind control. And I think a lot of people thought, well, they're probably going to talk about some of these old programs, you know, LSD when you're least expecting it. Some of the programs like the Phoenix program. I will ask about that. But, you know, as I thought about this program before it started tonight, I thought, if somebody can give me a better example of mind control than ISIS is doing on these people over here and over there in Britain, and they're doing it remotely with this produced stuff they've got. If there's a better example of mind control out there, I don't know what it is. And this one's pretty important. So anyway, Neil, welcome back. Just one quick question for you on Syria. I've been saying this thing in Syria, this soup that's going on with the Russians and the proxy war and everybody behind everybody, and so many planes in the air, including yours and ours, Russians, eventually something horrible is going to happen, almost inevitably.
It doesn't look great, does it?
No, I'd say not.
No, I mean, and again, you know, what the outcome of this, I suppose one argument you could make is it depends on your personal view of the Cold War. Whether that was a genuine threat or whether it was, you know, an excuse to channel funds. And with all of these things, I imagine that it's not that straightforward, and it was a mixture of the two, probably leaning towards the latter. It's people are playing a very, very dangerous game at the minute, and what the outcome will be, it is strange. But to be quite, we've been in a state of constant war for, either hot or cold for as long as I can remember, to be quite honest. Now, obviously, this is involving superpowers and such like that, so it looks decidedly more serious. But again, it is very, very strange. What my only advice would be to try and sort of, and again, it sounds rather trite, but don't be afraid. You might have very good reason to be afraid, but again, the point is that fear eats the soul. Fear causes you to not be able to react sensibly and rationally.
Yeah, well, this is gallows humor, but I'm going to try it out on you. I tried it out on a physicist, and it just didn't even go anywhere. And that is, if nuclear war starts, a friend of mine said, he's going to run out and try to get directly under one of the incoming bombs and call for a fair catch. sort of work. I mean, it's a football metaphor, but
yeah, I get it. Yeah. I like it.
Okay, good. All right. So, what is or was the Phoenix program, and did it continue?
Well, I mean, it's a very strange thing. It ties in with this concept that we were talking about earlier about constant fear from an exterior point, making people causing stress. Now, essentially, what the Phoenix program was it was a terror campaign that was conducted on the civilian population, or people that were it was justified as people that were deemed to be supportive of the Viet Cong, but actually 9 times out of 10 it was used on civilian populations. And what this was during, as I say, the Vietnam War, certain CIA teams would go into villages, seemingly again they would support the Viet Cong, and they wouldn't attack the leaders. They wouldn't attack the actual fighting troops or whatever. They would attack their wives and children. Now, in the Phoenix program, they actually did very, very gruesome acts that were at the time were blamed on the Vietnamese, but it later transpired were actually caused by Americans, including sort of like disemboweling, beheading, positioning of bodies. One particular one was that they put a large picnic table in the middle of the village, and they put places and knives, forks, plates, and etc., etc. And then they would put all the dead bodies of the villagers sat in position around this table, take their heads off and put their heads on the plate facing them. And then what they would do is they would leave, and they would never leave an explanation. They would leave that horrible, horrible open question of what on earth has happened here, aside from the fact that this was obviously incredibly brutal. And do you know, when the people got back to the village, they didn't really feel like fighting anymore, because they were so disheartened that basically it shocked them. It caused such incredible trauma. And this is the point. It all comes down to trauma. Every type of mind control, to a degree, has an element of trauma, a traumatic experience that causes somebody to basically break off from their normal mode of thinking, create what's called amnesic barriers around horrific acts, and it simplifies the personality. Basically, you get like a sort of honeycomb personality, often perhaps numb to certain emotions. That can't react. And I think that is exactly what will be happening with a lot of these people where they feel a justification to join ISIS. Again, not to excuse, merely to explain that these are obviously damaged, disaffected people. You can't convince somebody to do horrific things like that without using that to fill an incredible part of their psyche and bolster their personality. But yeah, I mean, that was essentially the Phoenix program, and it was essentially, I think it was William Colby that was in charge of it. Now, what's bizarre, and this wasn't really my theory. Dave McGowan is recently died, which is a great shame. Noticed that the sort of booning serial killers that seem to be using methodology that was not dissimilar to the tactics used in the Phoenix program, seemed to sort of burgeon at the same time as William Colby came back from Vietnam. Now, again, it sounds crazy, but if you look at the influence of institutes like the Tavistock Institute, like Crew House, like Wellington House, which basically, as I say, started all these institutions in America as well. Their chief methodology is to use trauma on the civilian population in order to terrify them into passivity, basically.
Huh. It seems so counterintuitive. You say that, and yet, you know, they're doing the exact opposite thing.
How do you mean? By passivity, I mean a lack of decision making.
Oh, yeah, okay.
You go to an authoritarian and go, tell me what to do about this.
All right, but the images of horror that come from ISIS seem to have another effect entirely.
Well, they do. It depends. Like, I mean, the effect that they have on, say, Western audience is to terrify them and to go, this is monstrous.
Yeah.
And then perhaps go to somebody, what can we do about this? We need to stop this. We need to stop this. So that's how it would work. To the other people, it's like when people used to it's like a battle cry or something like that. They're getting pleasure in terrifying the opponent. They're psyching you out. That's what the mentality of that is. Staring down another boxer or whatever. Or like barbarians used to basically like cover themselves in blood of their enemies or something like that. And, carry the heads of their enemies on pikes and whatnot. Right. It's the same mentality. It's to terrify. So it works, obviously everything has a sort of stimuli and a response to it. The point of it is to terrify the population. They go, oh my God, these people are maniacs. We better acquiesce to all their needs because otherwise we're going to lose.
Well, I'm not sure anybody's saying that.
No, I mean, but that's the point of it. And the other response is to go, well, no. I mean, we need to do something about it. I mean, the fear response, as I'm saying, the point of it from ISIS's view is to terrify. The point of it, what it actually does is it does terrify, but the response to that isn't necessarily that they're just going to stay frozen, or is it? Because it depends again entirely on your view of who this actually benefits.
Well, it seems to do two things. Certainly, it does terrify, but then on the other hand, it seems to recruit as well.
Yeah.
Same time.
Of course, yeah, because it's a show of power, and you get to join this powerful entity. Like, it's like people, I mean, this might sound like a glib thing, but it's like nerdy kid from the suburbs vicariously living out his fantasy through a rap song. Yeah, I'm a gangster. Yeah.
Right.
So it's this. I know that's a really, really thin end of the wedge, but it's the same thing. You can associate yourself with this more powerful group. Depends how you want to take it. It depends on your personal ideology.
All right.
So most people would think it's foreign.
All right, let's try this. Let's move into another area and ask how entertainment, and that's most of what people watch after all is entertainment, how entertainment can influence how we view the world.
Well, I mean, have you ever read books like Operation Hollywood, for example? I mean, what a lot of people don't realise is that that seemingly, well, I'll say it like this: the most effective propaganda is something that you would never assume was propaganda. Now, did you know that the CIA has a liaison office with Hollywood that's also incongruent with in Congress with the Department of Defense? Now, what this basically does is it has an office which can lend you all sorts of equipment or people or troops or, whatever to make your film look extra special and fantastic.
Sure believe it. I believe it. I do.
Sorry?
I believe it. Simple as that. I believe that the CIA probably has exactly that.
Well, it's absolutely true. You'll find that they actually thank the Department of Defense on the end of the films. But a lot of films that come out today, particularly ones that are aimed at the youth market, like Transformers and Iron Man and all the Marvel sort of films and stuff like that, and also particularly things like Zero Dark 30 and Hurt Locker, although they are interesting cases because they pretended not to have backing of the military, which was nonsense. They have backing of the military, but what the military says is essentially, well, we get the final rewrite of the script. Even some films like Stripes. Do you remember that Bill Murray film, Stripes?
I do.
Well, that was that had a similar involvement of the military, and a lot of the characters were changed. The original script to Stripes is nothing like the film that actually came out.
Yeah, I'm not surprised by this at all. Not at all. I would expect it, and I understand it.
But I mean, a lot of people wouldn't, because basically you assume that, it's a bit of entertainment, a bit of escapism. I'm just going to go and watch these giant robots smash each other to bits for an hour and a half. And you don't assume that subconsciously what they're doing is they're promoting a pro-military, foreign policy type message that is actually coming through these films. And again, this isn't wishy-washy. This is absolutely admitted. I say it used to be run by George Tenet, who used to be the head of the CIA. That used to be the liaison office. I forget who exactly runs it at the minute. It's a different gentleman. But numerous films have done that, and then films that basically refuse to make the changes in the scripts. They don't get the help. So, films, for example, Apocalypse Now was flat out refused because the actions of the Marines were deemed unworthy of a Marine. Other things like there's a film called Wind Talkers, and in it they used to...
I've seen both. It didn't affect... Apocalypse Now was a great motion picture.
Oh, no, absolutely, but it was about that. I'm a big fan of it, but what I'm saying is that the message wasn't deemed wasn't deemed positive enough for the American military, and so they refused to allow the use of any of their equipment in it, and so he had to go and borrow some off somebody that was fighting a war at the time, and so it caused a load of fuss. But like the same thing happened with James Bond films, for example, the characters that make massive errors. Originally they were an American, and they were changed, and in return for that they were allowed to use certain aircraft carriers and such like that.
So would it be fair to say that Hollywood, over the years, slowly but surely manipulates you into a point of view?
Certainly can, and it certainly does in the more mainstream films who have, an economic reason to do this. Obviously there's still art that gets out there. There's, films like Apocalypse Now, and there's films that have a sort of a negative portrayal as well. But what's strange is that this certain raft of films, all that seem to be aimed at a certain demographic, which, by the way, just happens to be people who are of that age where they might want to join the military. They all have the backing of the CIA and the military, and have an implicit overtone of being positive towards American foreign policy.
Remarkable. And in Britain, since we can talk about both countries, do you think that your British government has the same sort of control over the media, or even more so?
They do have embedded journalists. I mean, this was exposed by a gentleman called David Shaler a few years ago. I mean, what's interesting is we've been talking about propaganda and stuff, and people will be like, no way, I'm informed. I watch all the different news and stuff like that.
Yes.
During the Kosovo invasion, the CIA embedded 1,200 agents at CNN. To influence the news. Basically, the whole point of them was to spread propaganda. They admitted this. One person who was interviewed says, are you affecting news? So we call that propaganda. He said, it's above my pay grade to say yes or no, but I certainly hope so, because that's what I'm doing. Also, the CIA owns 16 times more publishing houses than the largest legitimate publisher in America. So magazines, books, all the sorts of things that would paint a certain picture. I'll give you other examples, like films can change history. I mean, everybody's Braveheart is littered with historical inaccuracies, but that's basically people's... Have you ever seen a film called U-571?
Yes.
It's about the stealing of the Enigma machine.
Yes.
That almost caused an international incident, because basically the Enigma machine was stolen by British soldiers and agents. That film shows that it was plucky Americans that actually did it, and it actually caused Prime Minister Blair to publicly denounce that particular film. But I mean, I'll give you another example, right? Have you ever heard of the phrase or the incident, the storming of the Winter Palace?
No, that's one I haven't heard of.
Right, okay, it's an incident that happened during the Russian Revolution, and the common sort of mythos is that this army of peasants sort of stormed into the Winter Palace, which was this, where the Tsar and his family lived.
And it was that when they were killed?
Obviously a big symbol of their oppressive regime.
Yes,
and they went in there and killed everybody, and there was a huge, fabulous uprising.
Right.
What actually happened was nothing of the sort. It basically, some people wandered into there. Everybody of any importance had already left. They got lost, and some of the servants actually helped them out of there. But a few years later, as part of Russian propaganda, they staged a theatrical recreation of this event, and it was filmed by a gentleman called Sergei Eisenstein, and then this was published in a film called 10 Days That Changed the World. Now, bizarrely, if you go to certain history books, not all history books, but they will show pictures, stills from the film, and proclaim them to be photos of the incident that never took place. So that incident has become absorbed in the cultural lexicon to the point where certain historians will swear blind that it was a real event.
Is there a way to recognize the fact that you are being exposed to mind control and counter it? In other words, sort of like an alarm clock going off in your mind as you sit and listen to the news or watch a program that you're now the subject of mind control.
Well, I mean, yes and no. I mean, obviously, it's very, very sophisticated. And now, like anything, you don't put a big plate of green stuff with a sign in it that says poison on somebody's...
no, of course not.
You put it in a pie. That's or in their favourite food. So it's obviously well disguised. What I would say is, when anything comes to you, you think, well, could there be an ulterior motive? Like, who would benefit in positioning me in this particular way? Who would ultimately benefit in me hating this person? Like, we've all seen The Godfather and stuff like that. You can kind of think of news like that. Okay, right, so they're telling me this. How could they possibly benefit from if that happened to be not true?
Well, that's kind of like follow the money. All right, hold on, Neil. We're at a break point. I'm Art Bell. This is Midnight in the Desert. We're talking about mind control. If it's really good, like a good phone tap, you never even know it's there, right?
With that, we will leave Art Bell and his guest for this evening. We will pick up the final, basically 55 minutes on tomorrow's episode. So be along for that in the overnight segment. For that with Art Bell and Neil Sanders, and I would have to assume that they should be getting to phone calls on this topic pretty quickly when we do join them tomorrow. But that will also lead to us having the end of our day here in Dominion. So as always, as we have one final fight to lend us out, please make sure you do like, share, and subscribe. Get us to the goal of 50,000 views, 1,000 subscribers. So Boxy over at Nexters will send us those nice red packages. And of course, the Google YouTube will actually pay attention to us. CoinBase and Ibotta are below. Both of them will give you $10 free when you sign up for their services. Coinbase, of course, lets you then get into Coinbase Earn. 2-minute lessons, 1-question quizzes to get up to $100 in free cryptocurrency that you do not have to keep, and Dominion does allow crypto as a payment method. Ibotta, however, rewards you for what you have to normally do anyway, shopping and everything else for your normal needs, wants, and desires. So until we do meet again tomorrow, as always, like, share, and subscribe. Be kind to one another. It's always a great new world to release the Krakens. I hope you have a great evening. Enjoy your good night's rest as we finish this final section of the fight as we march on tomorrow here from day one. Have a great night and enjoy your good night's rest. As always, have a great night rest, everybody. Enjoy your evening.